Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we can start. No problem.
Should I start, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Sharu madam, please begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Speaker Dr. Rahul Pungaliya, sir. Professor and Head Dr. Sharad Binnod. The Coordinator of the FDP Dr. Tushar Patil, sir. Senior colleague Dr. Yogesh Gangude. Other colleagues of the department and all the participants from the different parts of the country. I welcome you all on behalf of the Department of English, KTHM College, on the second day of the Faculty Development Program on Literary Theory and Criticism. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce today's guest speaker, Dr. Rahul Pungaliya, sir. Dr. Rahul Pungaliya is a retired professor of English. He has more than 30 years of teaching experience. He is a creative writer and has published an anthology of poems, Gawa Baher. His areas of interest are literary criticism, poetry, Marxism, spirituality, and Marathi literature. I want to highlight one thing here, that he was once an active Marxist and ran a group called Saukasha, which means in English inquiries, to discuss many socio-cultural issues in contemporary India. In this session, he is going to talk on Marxism, a social, political, and economic philosophy named after Karl Marx. Over to you, Dr. Rahul Pungaliya, sir.
Great, thank you. It's pretty clear about the exact topic that I'm supposed to talk about. But there's some information.
Pungaliya sir, please adjust your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you are clearly audible now.
Right. So I wasn't very sure about the exact topic. This program by English Literature Department. So is it about and literature? Is it about Marxism literary theory? Or is it about Marxism itself?
Pungaliya, sir. Hello, sir.
If
It's
indication,
not clearly audible.
are you audible? Am I audible now?
No, the voice is very low.
So mic need to be little close to your mouth.
So headphone, you can use headphone.
I don't use headphone. Am I clearer now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I think I'll have to talk to a class. I mean, I'll have to use the same pitch and volume that I normally use when I classroom. Since I'm alone sitting here in the room, my voice was rather muted. But okay, now am I clear? I mean, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Today I got different indications about the topic that I was supposed to talk about. And one was that I was supposed to talk about Marxism and literature. Second was Marxism and literary theory. And third was Marxism itself, just as the present, announcer announced just a few minutes back. She said that, I'm going to talk about Marxism, philosophy of Marxism, and practice of Marxism. So what I'll do now is I'll try to combine all three. I mean, you have to realize that all three topics are very different topics. Because when you talk about Marxism as philosophy and Marxism as social theory, then you are going to talk about Marxism proper. That is the writings of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Lenin, and later Marxists. Some of them were Euro-Marxists, some of them were communists. I mean, not all Marxists are communists, not all Marxists are orthodox Marxists, and some Marxists are ex-Marxists or retired Marxists. Just as I retired from my job a few days back, I retired from Marxism too. a few years back. So, some Marxists are retired Marxists too. So there is a variety among Marxist thinkers, and it's a very vibrant living tradition of thought, though not of action anymore. I mean, you do not see many Marxist movements, socio-political or economic movements in the world. What you see is Marxist theory is in proportion to the demise of actual Marxism. Marxist theory is becoming more and more abundant. So even people as disparate, as different as Derrida and Foucault, as different as, say, Lukács and Adorno, as different as, say, Althusser and Friedrich Jameson, all of them would call themselves Marxists. And Indian Marxists also, such as Ejaz Ahmad and Prabhat Patnaik, Utsa Patnaik, historians such as Irfan Habib. So all these are kind of, these are, varieties of Marxism. So it is better to call it Marxisms. So talking about such a variety of Marxism within a span of 1.5 hours is well nigh impossible. What one can do instead is kind of, one can talk about kind of, some common lineaments of Marxism, if there are any, because many people will just disagree about that too. Is Marxism a dialectical materialism? Is Marxism a historical materialism? Is Marxism a deterministic theory? Is Marxism just a critique of capitalism? Or is it some recipe for utopia, a post-revolutionary society? Is it a kind of a critical theory? Is it an analysis of the present world that we live in? Or is it a kind of, theory? So there are, many kind of, shades, many aspects, many varieties of Marxism, and there are very few agreements about what exactly Marxism is. The second topic that was suggested to me was Marxism and literature. Now, literature is obviously much bigger. Is there any problem? I can hear some voices. Anyway, so literature is a far bigger category than Marxism. So it is 1,000 years.
Hello. Pungaliya sir, एक मिनट. देवड़े sir. Okay. Now you can speak.
Okay. Did you miss out on something that I said just?
Yes.
Sharat?
Yes. Just repeat.
Was I audible all the while, or when?
Sir, just go 1 minute back. Just go 1 minute back.
Right, well, I'm not a record. It's not a record.
Just 2-3 lines we missed. Somebody was talking, so I just muted all.
I know it's not a recorded speech, though.
Yeah. It means
using the
in 1 minute span, I would say.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Look, so what I was saying is that, well, it's difficult to recall what I said just 2 minutes back, because it was a flow of what I was saying. And in the flow, I don't really recall. But anyway, to start somewhere back in time, what I was saying is that there is this, Marxism and literature. When you are talking about Marxism and literature, then literature is a far bigger entity, far bigger category, of human praxis. And Marxism is much smaller. I mean, howsoever ambitious Marxists would be, and how much kind of extravagant their claims may be, they will have to admit that literature pre-existed Marxism, and it is going to outlast Marxism too, because literature is something which is far more permanent human action, and Marxism, as much as my lights tell me, my understanding of Marxism tells me, Marxism is something which is an offshoot of capitalism. I mean, so Marxism was impossible in Middle Ages, in feudal societies, in ancient societies, and it could be possible only as a kind of a theorized protest against the excesses of colonialism, imperialism, globalization, and capitalism, which is the mother of all the three, uh, all the three systems that I talked about. So, Marxism is something that was born in 19th century, and it's almost kind of as a practice over now. So, I mean, there may be some people getting inspired with Marxism, but they're very few and far between. Whereas literature is still continuing, and it will continue for many, many more centuries unless human beings destroy themselves with the kind of, their greed and the momentum of development that is pushing them along a very dangerous kind of path. So I would request people not to greet each other in the chat box, because I don't think that is absolutely necessary, and it is rather irrelevant, these kind of greetings during the lecture, because it comes on my screen too, and it rather upsets me. So, I would humbly request all of you to not chat with each other when I'm talking, and only if your comment is necessary to steer my conversation in the desired direction that you want to, then you can, make such suggestions to me. Okay, so Marxism and literature is how Marxism interprets the past literature and how it interprets the present literature, and what does it foresee about literature in future. So its approach to literature. So that is the topic number 2 that was suggested to me. And Marxism certainly has a particular approach, a specific approach, or I would rather say several approaches towards literature. And all these kind of approaches to literature depend upon Marxist understanding of time and Marxist understanding of history, and what it thinks to be the human creative activity and the role of human creative activity in the society. So Marxists kind of confrontation, I would say, with literature as an entity, as a social institution, is to put it in the right perspective, one among many ways of approaching literature. I mean, you can approach literature in so many valid ways, and Marxism is not the only valid way in approaching literature. Like, for example, you can study literature as a kind of an aesthetic object. You can study literature as a kind of an outpouring of the inner self of a person. You can study literature as a kind of, a cultural product, a cultural entity. And as Marxists would have it, you can study it as a kind of, a document of historical development of man or humanity. Okay. And a kind of, development of the subjective spirit of man, the creative impulse of man. So kind of, there are there is one among kind of Marxism is just one among many ways in which you can approach literature. Now, the third topic that was suggested to me initially, I think, was the literary theory and critical theory developed specifically by Marxists. Several any reader for that matter, and especially any critical reader of literature, would have his or her literary theory. So it would be perhaps an Aristotelian theory or Kantian theory or new critical theory or Richard's kind of a theory or Eliot's theory, or it can be a deconstructive theory of literature, or it could be a postmodernist theory of literature, or it could be a psychoanalytic theory of literature, or a phenomenological theory of literature. I mean, there are several literary theories of literature. Now, is there a Marxist theory of literature? Again, the answer is negative, because as there are several Marxists, and Marxists tend to disagree with each other much more than they disagree with the outsiders, with others. So if Althusserian Marxist literary theory is certainly different than what Williamsian Marxist literary theory is, and it is different than Lucasian Marxist literary theory, and the Frankfurt School literary theory is very different than the committed literature theory of Stalin and the Orthodox communists in Russia. So you have got several Marxist literary theories as well. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to take stock of all these three areas as much as possible within a very short span of 1.5 hours, hoping that all of you feel that Marxism, Marxist literary theory, and Marxist approaches to literature are something which is accessible, and this talk should prove to be an encouragement for you to do your own reading, your own search of value, of relevance in the broader area called Marxism. So this is my hope, and here I begin. Now, Marxism is a kind of a movement against capitalism, which was a much kind of wider and much deeper movement than writing of one German Jew called Karl Marx. So there were many socialists such as Proudhon, Saint-Simon, French socialists. There were English socialists, and there were German socialists, and all these different kinds of socialists criticized the way society was shaping up in the wake of industrialization and capitalism. And so, I mean, basically these socialist thoughts emerged in the 19th century, and they kind of, wherever capitalism spread, capitalism is a mode of production, is a system of production that all of us are now, used to, and it has almost become natural for us. So all kinds of socialisms, and Marxism is one kind of socialism. So here socialism is a wider category, and Marxism is a smaller category, a subset of that category. Okay, so capitalism normally indicates private ownership of property. That it is not, the shirt on your back that you own, or the table and chair on which you are presently sitting, with whose ownership is immaterial. What is material for Marxists and for socialists is the ownership of the means of production. Like, for example, this particular technology that we are using, Zoom, and it is producing lots of intellectual wealth. So these Zoom meetings are producing lots of intellectual wealth. We are using tabs. I'm using, for example, a tab from which I'm talking to you. You may be using laptops or desktops or cell phones, various devices. So these devices, do you personally own them in a way, kind of, are manufactured by and actually owned by some corporations, some bigger entities than you. So they decide on the pricing of these devices. They decide on the longevity of these devices. So how long you can use your tab, how long it is going to last, when will it be outdated. This technological development is decided by much bigger players on whom you do not have any control. You do not have any control on Zoom, people who own the Zoom apparatus. Okay, you are using these means of production, you are renting them out, you are buying them. Okay, when you kind of install Zoom app in your mobile or in your tab or on your desktop, then directly or indirectly you are paying something for it. And these various apps, Google Meet, Zoom, Internet, are means of production in today's post-capitalist world. So where the information becomes productive is a definition of post-capitalism, where the knowledge itself has become a kind of, a source of production. And we, as you know, kind of, are so dependent upon these means of production, and we are helpless in front of them. I mean, if tomorrow the electricity provider or at present, for example, there is no Wi-Fi in my house, which is normally there. So the Wi-Fi provider, if he refuses service to me, I'll not be able to talk to you. If my tab gets outdated, I'll not be able to talk to you. So these means of production are out of my control. I'm alienated from the means of production, and yet I'm the producer. I mean, these ideas that I'm generating in front of you today, after reading, after studying several other people, I mean, these are not original ideas. I'm repeating what I've read elsewhere to you. So these ideas that are kind of, communicated to you with little bit of creativity, not though, I have learned from so many masters, so many thinkers, still, whatever, my way of putting it to you is something which is not in my hand. I'm dependent upon it. And this is what happens with each worker. Like the college in which you are working. If tomorrow you quit that college for some reason, or if the college decides to not have you in service, then you do not, though you would have all the skills of teaching, you would not have classroom, you would not have your own library, and you cannot invite students to attend to your lectures. Where would you lecture them? On streets? In the garden? How are you going to teach them? You're dependent upon those classrooms, those buildings. So who owns these means of production? Is a very important question that socialism raised. Socialism says that it is society, it is the community, it is the workers, the people, professors, and students should own the means of production. Whereas the capitalist system says, no, it is corporations, institutions, managements, private players should own these means of production. Okay, so you as producers are the forces of production. The machines, classrooms, the computer, internet are the means of production. And the ownership of these means of production is relations of production. So these are three central terms in any Marxist theory: relations of production, forces of production, and means of production. And the society is determined by an accurate description of these three areas. Like, for example, in a capitalist society, the industry or the factory is the means of production. The labor and the raw material is the force of production. And the capitalist ownership by banks or by corporations or by individuals, is the relations of production. And you're working for them. When you are working in college, you're not working for yourself. You're not working for students. You're working for your management. You're working for the government which pays you, if it is a granted college. If it is non-grant college, then the nakedness of these relations of production and the cruelty of these relations of production is very evident. If you are on a non-grant post in a college, then you know that you have to kowtow to the management. You have to be humiliated 1,000 times by the management and without any protest if you have to maintain your job. And without the means of production, your skills are useless. So this is capitalism. In feudal society, means of production were owned by community, but that community was a kind of an abstraction. It was a village. And you basically served that village. Here, the means of production was the agricultural land. Relations of production were hierarchically determined by social and religious factors such as your caste or your kind of status in society, whether you were a laborer, a free laborer or a bonded laborer, or whether you were a free man belonging to a priestly class or ruling class. That is, whether you belong to upper varnas such as Kshatriya or Brahmin, or you belong to the lower varnas such as Shudras or Atishudras. So these were kind of relations of production. And force of production is always human labor, because it is not the means of production which can generate wealth. It is not the relations of production which can generate wealth. Tomorrow, if all teachers stop going to a college, or if all users of internet stop using internet, then this entire market, this Google or Facebook or WhatsApp, is going to collapse. It's as simple as that. So the force of production is obviously the users. And Facebook is just an empty shell. The millions of data bytes that you put on Facebook, the photographs, the information, your thoughts, emotions, all that becomes alienated from you and appears to you as an object standing outside you and controlling you. It is actually you. It's like, your mirror image is dictating you how to behave. Facebook or WhatsApp is your mirror image. It's your own produce. It's your own product. And it has become so powerful that you get addicted to it. It is your using of Facebook. It is your using of, WhatsApp. It's your actual teaching in the class, which makes class meaningful, but you become unaware of it. You become oblivious of it. You tend to forget that it is me who has produced this college. It is me who has produced this thousands of books in the library. It is you who has produced those brilliant students. But you tend to forget it, and you feel that you are always dispensable. You can always be thrown out. So you are always an expendable kind of part of this system. Now Marx, along with other socialists, pointed this out in great detail in his several books, such as Das Kapital, Grundrisse before that, his writings on political economy. And this is something known as the labor theory of value. essentially it means, in very simplistic terms, is it is the labor which produces the value. Value is not produced in the circulation. Value is not produced by determination of the fees by the management of the course, but value is produced by the teachers who teach that course, the knowledge that is generated. Like, for example, in today's, NAC and API kind of a scenario. So this is a kind of a structure which is a ghostly structure which is standing against you and ruling you. You feel that you are your NAC score or you are your API score. This whole system is created by you and cooperation of people like you. If you choose to disallow this system, to disregard this system is going to collapse. But you would feel quite disheartened if your NAC score of your college or API score of an individual is less. Whereas you may be a brilliant teacher and your college may be really a good place where students are studying intensely and teachers are teaching with great love, interest, and knowledge. But if they cannot translate that into black science on white paper, into the reports and records and photographs, then they are valueless. They are considered to be useless. So here is another example of an alienation that is created by the system. Okay, so Marx and Marxism in general believes that there are these several classes which exist and throughout the history determined according to their relation to the means of production. So the classes which own the means of production are the ruling classes, and the classes which do not own the means of production but which actively share their labor, actively produce wealth that is needed to run the system, are the ruled classes or the oppressed classes. And this kind of relation continues through history, and every time there is a change in the means of production and relations of production, it is because the forces of production and means of production have outgrown the relations of production. They have become, like, for example, with technological development in 17th century, it became impossible for feudalism to continue in Europe, especially in Great Britain first and in Europe. Similarly, colonialism and advent of imperialism, British imperialism, when Britishers introduced international capitalism to India, Africa, China, and rest of the world, when they kind of owned all these nations, all these societies as their colonies, these colonies could not sustain their age-long social structures, their relations of production, their mode of production. So caste system, for example, or gender kind of system in India, which was basically a mode of production. This is how kind of we lived, and this is how we produced wealth. And there were many good things about it, as there were some bad things. Like, for example, ecologically and environmentally, it was a very sustainable kind of a system. Whereas the new imperialist capitalist system was ecologically and environmentally disastrous and suicidal. Again, the entire kind of individualism and what is considered to be liberty or freedom of man, this notion of individualism had some good things in its favor as well as some bad things against it one can talk about. That it created monads, it created human beings as atoms, which are who are unconnected to each other. So this whole kind of, each individual as a person who can offer his or her labor to the capitalist is something that is introduced by the international capitalism in India during 19th and early 20th century, when urban structures, when cities were made, when industries were formed, when railways and posts and Indian military and all these institutions were created, and individuals started serving as individuals. Before that, there was no individual, there was only community. There was only membership of a village or membership of a particular clan, caste, or a family. There were no names and identifications. And now that identification has gone to such a great kind of length that you are your identity card. You are nothing more than your identity card. So this kind of individualism is result of new relations of production which replace the older relations of production because they were more powerful. Now, how were they powerful? Were they more right? Marx, in a way, belonging to 19th century, and he was a progressivist who believed in human progress, answers in affirmative. He says that capitalism ends the narrow stupidity of secluded village systems. Villages are backward, they're stupid, they're superstitious. They do not make the optimum use of the resources. Whereas capitalism makes the optimum use of resources, human resources as well as the natural resources. And now we know how horrible this optimum use of resources. Again, here I'm criticizing Marx for his wholehearted welcome of capitalist system as against the feudal system, which he considered to be a progress. Of course, it gave liberty, equality, and individuality to people. People kind of, started respecting themselves. It ended caste discrimination. It ended gender discrimination. It ushered in democracy. But of course, all these are in quotation marks. All these statements that I made, previous 4 or 5 statements that I made are in quotation marks. I mean, have we really progressed? Is there real democracy? Are you really free? Have you become an individual? I mean, if you are so attached to your Facebook and WhatsApp, then are you really an individual? If you are so attached to the advertisements, if you are attached to the mass culture industry, are you really an individual? These questions were asked by later Marxists. And later Marxists were critical of Marxist, positivist, progressivist prejudice in favor of capitalism. Okay. Here, the case in point is that of the Frankfurt School. These were set of German Marxists in the early decades of the 20th century, who later had to go to an exile in America during Hitler's reign, and they came back to Frankfurt. And say between 1920s to 1970s, when Adorno dies, this was a kind of major voice of Marxist theory in Europe and in USA. So people like Herbert Marcuse, Theodor Adorno, Horkheimer, Leo Lowenthal, and later at present Habermas and his disciples. So these belong to a school which is known as critical theory, and they criticized Marxism from inside, and they tried to develop Marxism in a kind of more depth, because they found the earlier Marxism rather facile, rather superficial. So because they questioned this whole subjecthood and whether this subjecthood stayed unalienated over the kind of capitalist control of human lives. So that was the kind of question that was asked by these Euro Marxists. Then there were other Marxists such as Gramsci, who, I mean, this was an Italian school of Marxism following Labriola and Croce, the great aesthetician. Gramsci kind of questioned whether class struggle is a kind of clear conflict in black and white. I mean, are there two classes which stand against each other, or do they have common interests? Do they engage into some kind of a dialogue with each other? And his answer was no, the classes are not watertight compartments at odds with each other, but they engage in dialogue with each other. And they try to control each other's way of thinking, each other's thought systems in a struggle for hegemony. The term that he used was a kind of, a superiority of the conceptual order is to be proved in dialogue across classes in a society. So society is not, continuously in a state of revolutionary ferment, but it is in a state of peaceful dialogue with each other, where the dominant ideology of the ruling classes and the dominated ideology of the working classes continuously engages in a kind of competition for superiority. And it may happen, it can happen in a revolutionary kind of society where the working classes, with the group alliance with other classes, such as peasants, such as the clergy, such as the intellectuals, they can convince the entire society of the superiority of their thought structure. So this kind of continuous discourse is on. So it is not, society at war with itself, the famous kind of Hobbesian metaphor, or famous Marxist kind of, or what is, a cliched kind of, Marxist idea of class struggle. Class struggle is not always a kind of, war of maneuver, but it is many times a war of attrition, a war of position. This is what Gramsci said. Althusser, who is a structuralist French Marxist, put the entire kind of Marxist thought in a completely different way. So he talks about the birth of a subject in a society which is structured in such a way that an individual, to enter that structure, has to accept the rules which are going to bind that individual's behavior, thought, way of thinking, even the notion of the self. So the whole idea of interpellation, like you become an I or you in a sentence, and that grammar which determines the sentence is not created by you. You just occupy the place of I or me. So when I say that, I am talking to you, then I make you you and I make myself I. And in turn, when you would talk about yourself, you become an I and I become you. So your name, which comes on your various identity cards, which comes in your register, your roll numbers, your account numbers, are various identities that are given to you by the system. And you are tracked by those identities. Those identities are accepted by you through two kinds of forces operating in society. One is a kind of, a system of education which teaches you, whether this is formal education in schools and colleges and universities, or informal education in society, family, in cinema halls, television, WhatsApp, and Facebook. So whether through formal education or informal education, you kind of acquiesce to your place, you agree to your place in society. And there is another apparatus which is working against you, which is punitive. So if you do not agree to what society is demanding of you, your place in society, your position in society, then society is going to punish you. And that is called the repressive apparatus. So entire kind of judiciary, the legal mechanism, the police force, the military force is there to punish you if you do not agree to the society. So various Marxists, as I tried to tell you, kind of, approached individuals' relation to society, the development of forces of production, the changes in relations of production in different ways. Okay, like Marxist economists at present are talking about post-capitalism. So capitalist mode of production is also now a thing of the past. What you have is a global capital which generates wealth as much as by direct exploitation of workers, as much by creation of information and creation of data, creation of a virtual world, like the world in which we are participating. You are seeing my image, you are listening to my voice. I am believing that you are listening to me. I do not have any guarantee that you are listening to me. So this virtuality, this, wealth, which is created by the knowledge systems, by information technology, by sciences, and itself has become a major force of production. And here workers are becoming quite secondary. And that's why there is so much of unemployment. Like, for example, if one person is talking to you, and Sharad Binnur, your organizer, told me yesterday that around 400 people were listening to the first day's lecture. Normally, we lecture to 10 to 15 students. So just imagine, if a teacher is talking to 400 students at a time, then how many teachers are going to be unemployed? When actually, in an ideal situation, there should be one-on-one dialogue. There should be dialogue of one teacher with very few students, and there should not be a monologue, like the kind of monologue I'm engaging in with you. There should be a discussion. This is the ideal way of proceeding, and there will be maximum employment of teachers. But because of this technology, now we are making teaching a kind of, mechanically supported and endlessly repeatable, automatized kind of a thing. I mean, like, for example, if this lecture is recorded, then it will be reproduced in several places. And so many young thinkers who are capable of teaching, talking about Marxism, about literary theory, about literature, essence of literature in much better way than I am capable of, will be rendered jobless only because of the reproducibility, replicability of this medium. Okay, so for example, YouTube or Facebook can generate, I mean, it is difficult to say generate, but can reproduce knowledge where the actual interaction between individuals, which will give them a way of means of subsistence, is taken away from them. And this is just one example. I'm coming to this situation again and again because this is very kind of something that we share. This is a present situation. And that's why I'm talking about it more. So, kind of, this creation of culture and culture as an economic force, as a social, political, and economic force, is what post-capitalist Marxists are talking about. So instead of direct exploitation of workers, workers are rendered jobless. And they have to live half-employed or unemployed, dependent upon the mercy of the state or the mercy of the capitalists. So this is kind of, Marxist economists. Also, Marxist economists, talks about neo-imperialism or neoliberal kind of, globalization, where you do not have a place where you all work together, but you are all completely dispersed. Workers are dispersed. And you do not know who the capitalist is, who owns the means of production, because it is a corporation. Thousands of people, all the shareholders, all over the world, own a corporation, whether it is a Chinese or an American or French or Japanese or an Indian corporation, it doesn't matter. It may be registered in one country, but the ownership is dispersed. So here, again, the relation between classes, so the traditional kind of Marxist concept of class struggle becomes redundant with this kind of a situation. So it's quite likely that your neighbor, slightly more affluent neighbor, owns shares in a corporation, and you are a kind of, semi-employed person in that corporation. You may be, given some jobs, part-time employment by that corporation, or the ancillary of that corporation. So this kind of situation is emerging now, so where the distinctions between classes are very difficult to kind of locate now. At the same time, there is a great growth in the disparity of incomes. There are some people who own resources, whose personal wealth is more than the wealth of poorer nations, poorer countries. So, from one point of view, capitalism has become very explicit, because there are people who, for their pastime, would visit moon, would take a rocket journey, and there are people who do not have fare to travel by train or a bus, so will walk down thousands of kilometers from one place to another, just as we saw with the immigrant laborers in the first wave of corona in our country. So the means of production, whether they are travel or whether they are, information technology, mass communication, or actual, production sites, factories, are kind of, have centralized, are concentrated in the hands of the few. who are most of the time invisible to others. So there are kind of I'm just at the kind of the first section of my talk. This is not, of course, obviously all that Marxist economists, Marxist sociologists have said, Marxist thinkers have said about what society is and what a capitalist system is. This is only a glimpse of what Marxist theory is. To get back to the second section of my talk, where one has to talk about the relation of Marxism with literature. Now, traditionally, Marxism always looked at literature as something superfluous, and that is something that's a grave mistake that Marxism made. It always looked at literature as part of the superstructure. Could you excuse me for a minute? Sorry for this interruption. So, what Marxism did is it looked at the cultural aspects of human life, such as family, such as religion, such as various arts, architecture, the entire kind of educational system, as part of the superstructure, dependent upon the economic production and the kind of dependent upon the mode of production, relations of production, and means of production that I tried to talk about in the first 20 minutes of my lecture. So it did not take literature as seriously, it did not take arts as seriously as it should have. It looked at it as a kind of a faint glow of what economics was, what actual reality. So Marxism is kind of biased in that sense towards what it considers to be hard reality, and it considers language, words, various art forms, spirituality, human relations as something which supports or which is secondary to the economic production and reproduction of life. Okay, so this is the positivist aspect of Marxism. Positivism is a derogatory word. It means that you believe in only that which is actually present to you, present to your senses. And it's a very crude way of looking at the world. I mean, just because you can't see friendship or you can't see love, you can't show what friendship is or you can't show love is. Are you going to disregard? Are you going to say that friendship or love doesn't exist? You cannot show emotions. You can show behavior. So people would say that his behavior is that of an angry person, or his behavior is that of a kind person. But anger or kindness will not have any place in a description of a man if you are a behaviorist, and behaviorists are positivists. So Marxism in that sense, generally, at least the orthodox Marxism, the Russian variety of Marxism, that is Stalinist Marxism, was very positivist, and it insisted that literature should only represent reality. Literature should be, in that sense, this concept was very kind of, what would I say, very backward kind of a concept, because it believed in kind of, mimetic theory of art, where art is imitation of reality. So it was Aristotelianism in a way. Now, Euro-Marxists or neo-Marxists, Marxists who did not live in Soviet Union or the area of influence of Soviet Union, they rejected this outright. And they said that no, art is not a representation of reality. Art is reality itself. Art has its own reality. So they talked in favor of the autonomous art. Art being an autonomous force which kind of creates several alternatives which otherwise your society, which is an uneven, unequal society, would rather discourage. So art is a site of freedom for the alienated self of man, for the hidden potentials which are misused or disused by the production systems. So the entire creative impulse, which is killed by mechanical industrial production, because capitalism is endless repetition of things. You get the same shirts everywhere. You may feel that your shirt has, or your blouse, or your sari, or your dress is very individual, or your house is very individual. Your decoration, interior decoration, is very individual, but it is commercially and mass produced. It is commercially produced and it is mass produced. So there is no individuality in the clothes that you use, the houses that you live in, the poems that you read, and so on and so forth. An entertainment industry or cultural industry kind of a scenario. Whereas the true art, which will be an elite art, which will be an avant-garde art which will be art for only a few, because most of us live as part of a mass society, as part of a society which is kind of produced in accordance with the diktats of the ruling order. So even yourselves, even your most private moments are only a replication of what is fashionable, what is in at that moment, what is acceptable. So in this kind of mass psychology, in this kind of society where individuals have lost their individuality, it is art which tries to maintain the difference, the otherness of an individual. And that art may be obscure, may be something difficult to understand. Like, for example, it is difficult for you to understand Picasso's pictures, or T.S. Eliot's poems, or Ezra Pound's poems. And it is easier for you to understand, say, Hollywood or Bollywood songs, or Chetan Bhagat or Sudhamurthy's novels. But the true art, these Marxists said, is an art which kind of tries to fight this kind of alienation, this kind of dehumanization, this kind of naturalization and kind of commonification of your emotions, of your individual responses. It goes inward because the external reality is too similar to the other place and to other times. There's no individuality there. So this is an interiorized art. And that's why you have people like Joyce and Proust writing interior monologue, registering the stream of consciousness, because that is private, and that's the place where capitalism has not managed to put its mesh, put its web to trap the psyche. So that kind of escape into one's own self was something welcomed by Marxists. And let me ascertain this. Because normally, if you know about Marxism, then you would say that Marxists are for the committed art which is conscious about the society. Okay, art which is, conscious about the class struggle and which takes side of either the ruling class or the oppressed class. This is what kind of, you would normally believe, that if you are a communist or if you are a Marxist, then you have to stand by the workers. But you can be a truer Marxist if you reject the workers' consciousness, which has become a Philistine consciousness, which has become a mass-produced consciousness, as well as the consciousness of their masters, and you will create an art which will ascertain the individuality and the dignity of human being in a completely original way. Now, this art would certainly risk certain obscurity. It would certainly risk the, ability to communicate easily with others. It will not be accessible. And that is why it is significant and it is valuable. Because you have to make an effort. When you drink Coca-Cola, you do not have to make an effort. When you eat, say, a McDonald's burger, you do not have to make an effort. But if you make something, if you cook something in your house, then you have to make an effort to both make it as well as eat it. Because its taste is not going to be uniform. It is a kind of, eating at home with your family is a kind of, as is you participate in it actively. You make an effort. You kind of, try to engage with each other as individuals. Whereas when you consume something which is mass produced, then the lowest common denominator is operating there. The most common, the most simple level at which you exist is encouraged by mass production and mass consumption. So it kind of, reduces you, demeans you to the level of the other person. Okay. So kind of, this mass produced and mass consumed art, whether it is Hollywood films or Bollywood films, popular songs, or other forms of art that are produced, novels, as I told you, of, say, popular novels by popular novelists, and so on and so forth, newspapers, your social media. So all this is kind of, very reductive and very degrading and disrespecting your intelligence, your intellectual capacities, your individuality, your difference, your spatial value, and each individual is very valuable. Each individual is unique. On Facebook, your uniqueness is limited to your, changing profile picture, and which is a very kind of pathetic kind of uniqueness. Now, that's why Euro-Marxists, or people who belong especially to Frankfurt School, or people like Bertolt Brecht, reject socially committed art which reflects social reality. And they said that the social reality is nothing much to reflect on or reflect about or reflect. It is your own responses. It is your own structuring of that reality in individual way. This is what an artist has to attempt. That's why Brecht's epic theater. Brecht created a theater which was anti-mimetic, which continuously made its audience aware that it is sitting in an auditorium with full lights on, So there was no illusion that, you are sitting alone, because darkness creates that illusion of you sitting alone in an auditorium, in a theater, and only the stage is lit. In Brecht's theater, the entire auditorium used to be well lit. You were allowed to walk around, you were allowed to smoke, drink, have tea and coffee or whatever you wanted to, chat with others, talk with others. So you were not forgetful of the reality around you. And part of that reality was something that was happening on stage. And that stage was interactive. You could interact with the characters. You could, shape the way the play went forth. You could talk with them. They would ask you questions. They would ask for your confirmation about the action of the play, and so on. There could be a discussion about what was going on the stage. So the illusion of a representation was completely dashed, completely destroyed by Brechtian alienation A effect in his epic theatre. He created art which was self-reflective, which was self-critical, and not an authoritative description of the world which was consumed as a ready-made product by the audience. So you are not kind of, consuming the reality, but you are recreating reality, and thereby you could see multiple possibilities in the reality. The reality did not come to you as the given, but reality was something that you made, and it gave you a certain sense of agency. Similarly, when people who believe, like George Lukács, who was affiliated to Soviet Marxism in some way, he was under its sway, who was kind of, kind of believed in some kind of socialist realism. When they such people debunked Kafka or Musil or Joyce for their, mentally sick, neurotic outpourings of very private world, then Joyce and Walter Benjamin and Herbert Marcuse, who were all Marxist critics, came to the defense of this modernist art and said that now, in fact, this is a better art, a truer art than socially realistic art, because it's far more experimental, and it is far more it is far more kind of, liberating for an individual. Okay, so excuse me for a minute. So, so one has to kind of, realize that, there is no one Marxist standard way of understanding literature. What happens in Indian situation is that if you are a leftist or a Marxist, then you are supposed to, support all the kind of, socially committed and, art which shows the disparity, which shows, exploitation, which shows discrimination, and so on and so forth. Whereas the true Marxist heritage is a mixed heritage. It is not, it is not something which is limited to. It is not something which is limited to, a kind of, so-called revolutionary art, revolutionary imports, because arts do not really change the society. Arts can critically understand society, but if you want to change the society, then you actually have to engage into real politics, either in a Gramscian way or in Leninist way or whatever way you may choose. You'll have to either fight elections, you'll have to talk to people. I mean, you can't substitute your politics by writing a poem about politics. Okay, and this is what Frankfurt School theorists really found. Well, now there are other varieties of Marxist literary theories, and since my job today is to kind of introduce you or give you a glimpse of various kind of Marxist currents, I would certainly have to talk about the cultural theory of Raymond Williams and Stuart Hall. In mid-60s, you have this kind of school of Marxists in England who looked at culture as a material kind of force. And they tried to analyze culture as a force which could, create power, which could create and support the social distribution of power as much as the economic distribution of wealth. So the relations of production were as much material or as less material as the cultural forces of production. Okay, so it was television or other mass media or newspapers, various ways of identity formations that Stuart Hall especially was concerned with. These forces were analyzed by Raymond Williams and the School for Cultural Studies, and a new kind of discipline originated in a wider kind of Marxist framework, but it was very kind of very different Marxist framework than classical Marxism, because classical Marxism recognizes culture only as a kind of superstructure, whereas these people thought that culture was a material force. And that is how Raymond Williams talks about various kinds of dominant culture, emergent culture, and residual culture, and how it kind of gets expressed in various art forms and various productions of the media. So that is an important school. Then also you have thinkers such as Frederick Jameson, who talked about postmodernism and modernism in a kind of very perspicuous way, very perceptive way, and talked about how these kind of art trends are reflecting in a very kind of indirect way what is happening in societies at that time. So the kind of the entire kind of distortions with forms of modernism and the entire kind of superficiality of forms, depthlessness of postmodernism is described by Raymond Williams as by Frederick Jameson in great depth in his various writings, and you can refer to Frederick Jameson about that. Then to come to the Indian kind of Marxist theoretician, one major Indian Marxist theoretician is Ejaz Ahmad, and he is kind of as has taken a very consistent stand against post-colonial understanding of the world created by Edward Said, and he takes issue with that. He talks about the India which is not created by the Western imagination, but he talks about the regional kind of cultures that are in India in his great book called In Theory. So these are various Marxist debates, and these are kind of various Marxist liberal theories that you would encounter if you enter this area of Marxism and literature. Now, I suppose there are last 10 minutes left. If there are any questions, I would invite you to ask them. Thank you, Sharad.
The story too, you can take first as a story.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, participant can ask questions now.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, Lakshmi madam, please proceed.
Sir, good afternoon. Myself, Lakshmi Salvi, from the University of Mumbai. Sir, am I audible clearly? Hello? Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, madam, you are audible.
Okay, sir, yes, sir, really thankful to you because you have really opened up. Okay, sir, thank you so much for arranging, very insightful lectures by Rahul, sir. And he has really opened up many new areas. I just want to ask him that he was talking about capitalism. And during the course of his lecture, he said that capitalism gave more liberty, freedom, individuality, and a democracy, and broke the domination of the feudal lords. Okay, it's true that individual got more space for deciding for themselves, but on the other hand, the capitalists open up door for the exploitation. So I think that the form of capitalism was changed, but its undercurrent evils were still there. So what is your take on this, sir? Hello?
But also I can ठीक है बहुत ITI जनरल ITI ऐसे ही बहुत ITI मेरा जिस ITI में
Those who wish to speak, only they will unmute themselves.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Please proceed. Yes, please proceed.
I think I have already asked my question. My question was received or not?
I think sir didn't receive your question. Wait just a minute. Let me check whether sir is there.
Pungaliya sir left the meeting, sir. I think sir has left it.
Okay, sir. I have already posed the question. Okay, no issue.
Okay, thank you, madam. May I request all the participants, those who wish to ask the question, please type in the chat box. We will convey the question when the sir will join. Darshan sir will convey your questions to the Pungaliya sir. Please type your question in chat box.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello,
Yes,
sir.
Yes.
Sir, can I get the mobile number of Rahul, sir? Pungaliya, sir?
Yes, we will share with you, ma'am.
See, sir is there. Sir has not left it. Hello, Pungaliya sir.
Okay, yes, he is there. Can I clear my doubt a bit?
Yeah. Right now, yes, you can ask sir questions. Pungaliya sir.
Oh, yeah. Myself, Professor Salvi from University of Mumbai. Sir, was talking about capitalism. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. Sir was talking about capitalism. He said capitalism gave more liberty, freedom, individuality, democracy, and broke the domination of feudal lords. Okay, it is true that individual has got more space for deciding inherent exploitative qualities remain be intact as it is. What is your take on this, sir? I'm done with the question, sir.
Hello, ma'am. Lakshmi, ma'am. Sir,
Yes, sir.
sir seems to have left the meeting, and very soon we are going to start the another
Okay,
meeting.
no issue.
You do one thing, ma'am. Just leave the question in the chat box.
Okay, sir. No issue.
We will convey your question to sir, and in case we get sir's number, then we will post the number in the chat box as well. Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
I want to talk.
Okay,
I'm Sanjay Savle from KTHM College, and if Rahul sir is not there, then can I talk on behalf of him and answer madam's?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes.
It is true that Rahul sir said that capitalism explore many new avenues of freedom and other not emancipatory but developmental things that are associated with freedom. But that is just one part. Frankfurt School and critical theory always criticized exploitative form of capitalism, and they are not praising that dimension. Capitalism is exploitative. Capitalism has many negative things in its idea and practice, and in fact many other shades of exploitations are explored by critical theorists and Frankfurt School. It may be media or any other things in art and in various forms of expression. Explore the hidden exploitation, hidden ways of exploiting the workers and ordinary people. They are explored, and that is not neglected by the Frankfurt School. That is the point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Darshan sir. Darshan sir.
Pungaliya sir is back.
I think Rahul sir is rejoined.
Yeah. See, Pungaliya sir is back in the meeting. So if anybody wishes to ask any another query, so they are now free to ask sir questions. Yes.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. I'm Sachin Bagwal from DVG College. I want to ask Dr. Pungaliya that since there are so many complicated models of explaining society and the literature as the outcome of the discourse among the societies, what kind of model or let's say cultural studies?
Hello, Pungaliya sir. Okay. I think there might be some network issue. That's why Pungaliya sir is unable right now to talk to you. Okay. Sir, just leave your question in the chat box. We will try to convey your question to sir. Okay. Okay. Now I request. Now we have come to the end of this session. We are having another session which will begin shortly at 3:30. So don't leave the meeting. Do join us for the second session as well. Now I request Sunita Borde madam to propose vote of thanks for this first session.
Hannah.
Borde
Good
madam.
afternoon, everyone. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Sunita Borde.
See, Sunita Borde, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm there. Yes, sir.
Please proceed with vote of thanks. Yes.
There are some voices, some disturbances are there. That's why you couldn't hear me.
Madam, please unmute yourself
Yes,
now.
yes. Thank you
Please
very much,
proceed
sir.
with vote of thanks.
Yes, thank you. So I take a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this session of Faculty Development Program. I would like to thank the speaker of today's session, Dr. Rahul Pungaliya, sir, for enlightening us with his knowledge. The session was really full of knowledge and informative. And I'm pretty sure the ideas and knowledge that Dr. Rahul Pungaliya sir gave us will definitely prove fruitful in our academic journey. I would like to express our deep gratitude to the Honorable Dr. V.B. Gaikwad sir, Principal, HHM College, Nasik, who has always been the real source of inspiration to us in all our academic endeavor. And my heartfelt thanks to Professor Dr. Sharad Binod sir, the head of the department, and Dr. Tushar Patil sir, the coordinator of the faculty development program, and Dr. Yogesh Gangurde sir, for their valuable contribution, guidance, and support in all our efforts. And finally, I thank you all for your presence and attention. And shortly, the second session will start. So I hope that all of you will be there. So thank you very much for this session.
Dear participants, shortly we will begin with a second session. The speaker for second session is Dr. Anand Kulkarni, who is a renowned personality in the domain of criticism. You all know. So please just wait for 2 minutes. We will have 2 minutes break. Okay, thereafter we will begin with another session. So be with us, don't leave the meeting.